Here are two burning questions for our guest tonight. How do you exercise? By being perfectly still and quiet. Secondly, how do you effectively translate prayer into the ones and zeros of binary code in the computer language? We'll try to get him to answer these questions and more tonight, so please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa and welcome to EWTN Live, where we bring you guests from all over the world. Our guest tonight is a fellow Jesuit. He's a retreat director and a researcher who's convinced that a 21st century approach to the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola has the ability to strengthen the spiritual life of your whole parish and transform an individual's dysfunctional patterns into grace and healing. He's also the author of a book, Inviting God into Your Life, a practical guide for prayer. So please welcome Father William Watson. Welcome. Welcome, Father Bill.
Nice to be here.
Good to have you here. Now, you've come a pretty good distance. You are working where?
Seattle, Washington. First time in Alabama.
Is that right?
Right.
Oh, welcome. Yeah. We have the humidity that some of you have over there in Western Washington, but right. we just cake up a little more heat with it.
But it's nice and green here like Washington.
Yes,
so, right.
Yes it is. Yes it is. It's good to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us a little, you started an institute.
Right.
What is the name of this institute and what are you doing with it?
The institute is called the Sacred Story Institute. Okay. And we're using the Ignatian examination of conscience in a new rendition that I researched and developed called Sacred Story Prayer.
Okay.
And I called the institute Sacred Story Institute. Partly it's a little easier sounding than an institute on the Ignatian examination of conscience.
You think?
I think. Right. But I also wanted to convey the idea that, as Pope Francis said in one of his very first homilies, he said basically the creation is a love story. And the redemption of Christ for us is also a love story. And each of our lives is an invitation to be a part of this larger cosmic story that God has created for all of us. So I wanted to kind of tie in the idea that each of us has a narrative, a life history, that can be given over to this greater work of God in the universe for redemption.
All right. Now let's sort of break some of this down.
Okay.
What you're trying to do, and you're calling it sacred story, but still it's about the examination of conscience.
Exactly.
What is the examination of conscience?
It is a form of drawing someone into their interior life, into the silence of their heart, where they can hear maybe the two narratives, the one from the Holy Spirit and the one that Ignatius would call from the enemy of human nature.
Yeah, the bad spirit.
The bad spirit. There's a battle going on inside. Every great saint and every pope and every great spiritual director has talked about that interior battle. But many people are disconnected enough from their interior life that they're not really hearing anymore. C.S. Lewis talked about that in the Screwtape Letters when he was chiding Wormwood in the story. He says,
one of the characters in...
Exactly, right. Screwtape is the devil and Wormwood is a young demon who's to tempt someone away from their newfound faith. And Screwtape gets upset with him. He says, you young demons don't know what you're doing. He says, all you have to do is to get the humans to forget that God exists. He says, we have our best specialists working on it, and we're going to make the world so noisy that people won't be able to hear their hearts.
Yeah.
We're almost there, but not quite. And he wrote that in 1942.
And this is something extremely important because it is very difficult
Right.
to go anywhere without noise being played.
Right.
Not just street noises, but music or
Right.
other forms of poor quality music.
Cell phones.
Cell phones. You know, all of this is part of the noisiness
Right.
that screens God out. Not that people deny, very few people are atheists,
Right.
but a lot of people don't listen. So what do you do to help them listen?
Well, people have to, I think they have to realize, one of the things I put in our book, 40 Weeks in Ignatian Path to Christ, is I hammer over and over again that we're spiritual beings and to wake up to their spiritual nature. That we have radar to kind of experience the divine, and we have to wake up to that fact. It's a gift and a capacity. But we also need silence and quiet in order to be able to have that interior listening and that ability to kind of hear the still voice of God inside and to feel what's going on. You know, we communicate to people, a lot of people know the commandments and they know the laws, and the scripture says that God has also placed the law in our heart. And I've always believed that if you can get people deep enough into their interior self, even doing a 15-minute prayer discipline every day, they can know the truth based on the evidence of their own heart and what their heart feels like. They can sense the right from the wrong. And it's really important to get people there. And I like to do that because I said you can live your life with God as the cop in the rearview mirror, that you're only doing the right thing when you're being watched. Or you can live it, you know, out of love for God because you've understood who God is for you as Savior, and you want to give your life over to that. So, and that's what I'm trying to get people to do. And when I started this project to write this book for parishes, I went to 6 parishes in the Seattle Archdiocese with the blessings of Archbishop Peter Sarton. And I kind of laid out a regimen. I said I probably spoke to 20,000 people in 6 weeks. I invited everybody to a year-long prayer journey where they would be asked to pray twice daily for 15 minutes, to do a simple journal entry in the evening to kind of document one thing of grace and one thing of darkness that they experienced in the course of that day, and also to make a confession of their entire life. I kind of wanted to weed out the faint of heart, if you will. But I also offered...
What do you mean, when you say a confession of their entire life, everything they did in their whole life long?
Well, not things that they've already confessed.
Okay.
But many people have things that they've never brought to the fore, and many things they've forgotten. And if they take time, and I give people a 12-week period to kind of do what I would call spiritual archaeology over their life history, to kind of pull in the characters, the players, the experiences, and the events, trying to get people to see the connections between things, between virtues and vices and commandments, challenges, addictions, personal events that happened in childhood, you know, in grade school, so that a whole narrative, a whole story starts to take shape. And they kind of get this aha experience where they start seeing when this type of behavior happens, when I failed here, why I was graced here at this point. So they're starting to kind of get maybe a God's view perspective on their entire life.
But that is something that requires that quiet, the silence of being able to listen even to the experience of your own life.
Of your own life, right.
You know, besides listening to God, even being alert to what you yourself have done and past experiences takes
Right.
quiet.
It takes quiet, and it also takes, and this is where I think Ignatius was really, really gifted by God and also called forth his very practical instincts as a soldier. His method, his unique method for the examination of conscience is very practical, very pragmatic, and very focused. And it draws people into very specific parts of their life narrative where they start to see what's going on. 2 stories on the challenge of just listening. In my college work, I asked, I did a program where students shared kind of faith stories, and I picked this one young co-ed who was the ideal person to give a reflection on God's creative love. And the challenge of the talk was to remember an event in your life where you were absolutely convinced that God was real because of something that happened to you, and to recount that to the people on the retreat. Well, this was a person who went to Mass almost every day, was a faithful Catholic, all the outward appearances of somebody. This should have been a slam dunk talk for this person. But she came to me after a week and she couldn't recall a single event where God was real for her in her life. And I was kind of shocked. But to make a long story short, we talked this through, and she realized that when she was probably 4 or 5, the favorite person in her whole life passed away, her grandfather. And she was angry at God that God took Grandpa. And that anger kind of congealed in her heart. And it was totally out of her conscious perspective as a young adult in college. She was walking through all the rituals of her faith. She was praying, but her heart had been shut down because she had lost a trust and a confidence in God at a very young age. Once she remembered that, she realized as a young adult, well, of course, Grandpa was 88. Of course, he lived a full life. Of course, God didn't take Grandpa away. And then she kind of reconciled herself to that and then started remembering things that did happen. But she had to get beyond that in order to open up back to a kind of a trust and a confidence in God in her heart. And I tell people, this is the greenwood. I mean, these are the faithful people. And even the faithful people can be disconnected from the things that are really important in the inside. And it takes a strategy and a silence and a listening and questions to kind of draw out from inside of themselves what they need to bring to God for healing and hope and prayer.
And this is why we talk about it as doing a type of an exercise in the quiet and stillness.
In the stillness, right.
You know, that the exercise is one of examining your life and where the movements of God, of yourself, and of the bad spirit, the evil spirit, where these are all working in you. And finding that is the key of having a mature Christian life.
Exactly. And it's something that you can discover if you exercise and you practice. I remember when I was younger, I used to run every morning. That's when I was teaching high school. Remember those days, way back when. And I did it first thing in the morning, about 6 in the morning. And I was in very, very good shape. And I was in such good shape that if my foot landed in just the wrong way, I knew that something was going to hurt later in the day because I was in very good physical shape. You can get in very good spiritual shape as well if you exercise. And you can start to listen and attend to the things that have happened that you wouldn't pay attention to if you were not in good shape. You can be in terrible physical shape, have another bag of, Cheetos quick fried to a crackly crunch. I don't want to do a product placement here, but I love them myself. And be on the couch, have a second beverage and be totally out of shape, but not feel out of shape until you actually go out and try to run around the block once. And then you think, oh my gosh, I'm not in very good shape. So it's the same thing with the spiritual life. If you practice, you start waking up to your spiritual nature and you start paying attention and seeing things you didn't see before.
See, I think this is one of the keys to what you said. A lot of people don't feel physically out of shape because they don't even try to do any physical exercise. It's only when they make that new effort that they realize they're out of physical shape. And to see that that's true of the spiritual life. What do? I'm not that bad a person. I don't need to go to confession. If I'm not at Mass, they won't miss me. And and pray. You know, I'm so busy, I don't have time to get up
I'm not
early
that
to
bad a
pray.
person.
Right.
Right.
And I've had people say, you know, I'm a good person, I don't kill anybody. And
Right.
I always tell them, yes, you are a good person, so long as you keep comparing yourself to Al Capone.
Right.
The problem is that he's not the norm. Jesus Christ is.
My 91-year-old dad, when he was close to death, I said, Dad, you know, you really should go to confession. And he said, oh, I'm too old for all those thou shalt nots. And I thought, well, there's some other things maybe you could look at. So, but, you know, but he did admit, you know, about 2 weeks before he died, he said, Bill, he said, you know, he says, I wonder if I would have been one of those people in the gospel stories that turned their back on the Lord. So we're never too old for waking up to spiritual realities in our hearts.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I had a great conversation with my grandmother about 6 months before she died. She was 94, and she couldn't stand my grandfather. He was a mean guy. He was a mean guy.
Sure.
Bad guy.
Happens.
Yeah, he was really mean. Right. And so, and she wouldn't forgive him. And I told her she had to forgive him. And I quoted to her Our Father in Polish, you know, so she could hear that. And, you know, she said, okay, I forgive him. Wasn't enthusiastic, but
Right.
start.
Right.
And
It was the
you know,
beginning.
At
Right,
any
right.
step of life,
Right.
we need to do this.
Right.
But it's like with exercise.
Right.
It is better if you get started young
Right.
and keep it up through life.
Right.
Same with the spiritual life.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why we're developing a method of the examen for pre-K through 8th graders that we're working. We're going to be beta testing it in 3 archdioceses.
We mean beta testing.
Beta testing means is that it's like
I know how to test bait, but what's this beta
if
testing?
Microsoft has a new software, they throw it out there to the public. It's called a beta test to work the bugs out of it.
Okay.
So it comes from the cyber world. The tech guys would understand
Computer stuff.
that. Computer stuff. So it'll be a
So this is where you get the binary language coming in.
exactly.
So
right,
you're
right.
so you're doing this stuff with computers as
Right,
well.
right. And we'll research. But this is going to be a very important program because children have spiritual lives.
Yes.
And they're very transparent to the divine when they're younger. And we want to start teaching them at a very young age that they are spiritual beings, that they can hear God, and to start consciously praying to God and teaching them this interior listening method of Ignatius's examen in an age-appropriate way when they're in pre-K, and all the way through grade school, so that they have this tool, this spiritual tool for listening and discerning between right and wrong.
You know, I can remember back in the late 60s when part of the theory among catechists was kids can't make an act of faith. They, you know, and it's true, they cannot make a fully adult act of faith, but they do have a faith life.
They do.
We just have to do like they did in the old catechism and just take them at their own stages.
And if you raise the bar for them, people rise to the bar. When I was doing director of retreat programs at Georgetown, we did programs up at Wernersville Spiritual Center, the Jesuit center up there in Pennsylvania. I think we have somebody here in the audience from Pennsylvania tonight. Yes. And it was a 5-day silent retreat. And Father Aschenbrenner, a great Jesuit, told me once, he said, the students from Georgetown keep better silence than the adults in any other program that come here. And the reason that is because I knew they could do it, and I challenged them to do it. And they got so much from it. And again, it was one of those deep interior listening experiences that changed their lives. And I discovered also on those things, those silent prayer experiences, when you're doing them with other people, that a community forms in a much stronger bond than people even on talking retreats. Because when everybody is focused on their interior life, in the presence of the Lord is the one who weaves the community together.
Yeah, I certainly experienced that as a novice.
Right.
That when my class made our 30-day retreat in silence,
Right.
that's when we gelled as a class.
Right.
We weren't talking to each other. Now, maybe that helped.
But you notice things. You notice, who takes the second dessert, and you notice who's not looking happy, and you pay attention to things that you don't notice if you're just gabbing all the time.
Right. So this is an aspect of being able to encourage people at all stages to have some of this interiority, this
Right.
interior quiet,
Right.
and begin to learn to discern what are the spiritual movements taking place that the world just keeps drowning out.
Right, and trying to give people an incentive. I say that, pick your favorite running shoe company, that they can develop the perfect shoe that will guarantee that you won't have knee problems, shin splints, or back problems. But they can't make people buy it and put it on and exercise.
Right.
I think Ignatius has developed the ideal spiritual tool that is easily done in a short period of time. If done on a regular basis, you will start to hone your spiritual instincts, and you will start to notice things, and you will start bringing your life to the Lord where you need to bring it, where you need to be healed. And it's precisely the areas that we're most afraid of, that the bad spirit kind of stirs up all of this fear inside of us. Don't go there, don't make this retreat, don't be silent. And it's all, we're not even aware that we're running away from grace because the fear is so prevalent in the background. What I'm trying to get people to do is to confront the things that they're most afraid of,
Right.
maybe most ashamed of even, and to realize the incredible mercy of, and I always call Jesus in the book the divine physician, because he is the one who has come to heal us, and he is totally patient with our illnesses and our foibles and our addictions and our failures, but just wants us to keep bringing our lives and our hearts to him. And I also told that was my carrot on these, to get these parishioners engaged in the program. I said, you're going to do all of these, seemingly difficult spiritual exercises. I said, but I'm not looking for the saved. I said, St. Ignatius told the early Jesuits to go to the people who knew they needed help, and they would be the ones who would be open to your help. So I tell people, I said, I'm looking for the people who know they're messed up and who've tried many other things and who they want to be holy, but they know they're not. I said, you're my kind of person. So,
Right.
Right.
Mother Angelica wrote a book years ago called Answers Not Promises.
Mm-hmm.
And her publicist said, well, Mother, we've gone to all the nice shows that you can be interviewed on. And she said, I don't want just the nice shows. Get me to the sinners.
right.
So she immediately called up
Right.
Joan Rivers.
Great.
And Joan Rivers says, oh, have I got sinners? Bring her on. And by the time
Terrific.
Mother was finished talking, Joan was in tears.
I'm sure she was.
And the other people had become quiet because
Yeah.
going out to recognize we're all, Mother talked about, she's a sinner too,
Right.
and we're all in this boat together,
Right.
needing Jesus to
Right.
heal us.
And that's the grace. I have 22 parishes in Seattle who are walking through this 40-week program. One of the pastors told me that one of his parishioners came up to him, a gentleman in his 40s, I think, and said, Father, he said, I thought I was a pretty good person. He said, after 4 weeks of this, he said, I realize I'm a pretty bad sinner. But he wasn't discouraged. There was this kind of sense of hope and excitement that he got in touch with something that he wasn't aware of. Mm-hmm. And see, that's the great grace. And in terms of, I got in this business because of evangelization. When Pope John Paul II first talked about this phrase, the new evangelization, nobody was really quite sure what it meant. Way back in the early 1980s, maybe it was even in the 70s. I'm not quite sure when he first said that. But the genesis of evangelization is always, and always has been, and it's also the renewal of the church, it's when someone encounters the mercy of God in their life.
And they come to meet Jesus.
They come to meet Jesus. Forgiving them. It's like the woman at the well, come and meet someone who's told me everything I've ever done, as if everybody in that town didn't know everything she'd ever done. But the awe in her was, and I was loved. I was known and I was loved. And that is always the engine for evangelization, when people personally encounter the Lord in their sinfulness, and they encounter the incredible mercy and love of God, and they want to share the good news. They're sharing a person, and they're not just sharing doctrines or truths. And that is what is going to renew the church.
I remember when my own dad was in his final illness, I was at the hospital in the waiting room for him to come out of surgery and all. And people were watching the Jerry Springer show. And the two things that was popular at one point.
Incredibly popular, right.
And the two things I noticed about it, in light of what you say, is A, he would tell people, you shouldn't make anybody feel guilty.
Right.
Make them feel okay about what they do. Because there's such a fear of guilt and therefore of responsibility. And that was put into the show.
Right.
That was his catechism, in fact.
Right.
The other thing that followed from it is throughout the show, as people were becoming self-confident about admitting that, yeah, I did this, so what? Then noise, fights, yelling, and screaming. The noise broke out.
Right.
You could sense the demonic.
Right.
As opposed to the quiet that you're describing.
Right.
As a place where you come to meet our Lord.
Right.
And find his peace. And that's why I always, I learned to say that if there was ever a great image for your first day in hell, it's Jerry Springer's show. Right. With Satan played by Jerry Springer.
Right. You know, St. Ignatius, has taught us that the encounter with God in our sinfulness. In fact, he sets up these exercises, as you well know, in the first week of the spiritual exercises, that if you can't, he wants you to feel your interior sin, the disorderedness of your life. He wants you to feel the fact that your life is so out of kilter that you can never save yourself. As an incentive to go to the one who can.
Yes.
And if you can't feel it, he wants you to close the curtains in your room and sit in the darkness. It's so important that you feel it and experience it so that you reach out to the only one who can save you. And I oftentimes say that people in AA may be the most
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Alcoholics Anonymous may be the most graced ones because they've had an experience where they know that they're going to die if they don't reach out to a higher power.
Exactly.
The fact is, original sin is a terminal disease. We're all going to die from it, and we all have to eventually, at one point in our lives, hopefully sooner rather than later, encounter the one who is going to be the one who's going to save us.
I knew a Jesuit when I was newly ordained, and he was dying of cancer. I was sitting with him in the hospital, and Father Willie F. Ryan. And he said to me as a young priest, the best thing that ever happened to me is I became an alcoholic. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't know how much I needed Jesus.
Right.
And he ended up becoming one of the greatest alcoholism counselors in northern Illinois.
Right.
He was just known all over the two northern counties.
Right.
And it just turned his life around to realize what you said, I need Jesus. I can't do it by my wits,
and it's
by his grace.
The forgiven sinner is the one who has the compassion that can make themselves approachable to other people. They're willing to take the time. They will probe with the person. They're not going to harshly judge them because they know how much patience Christ had with them.
Right.
And they want people to experience that patience and that love of God. Right.
We need to take a little break.
Excellent.
But we're going to come back in about 2 minutes, and we want to get your questions and comments for Father Watson, for what he's saying about the spiritual life and about his program. So please stay with us. Thank you and welcome back. I'd like to give you just a little bit of information. We can find out more about what Father Watson is doing. There is the Sacred Story Institute, and you can go online to find them by going to www.sacredstory.net. Sacredstory.net. They also have a phone number that you can call, and don't call them too early from the East Coast because they're way over there in the West, and they get up late by our standards.
We do, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, but it's 206-302-7630. 206-302-7630, and find out more about what they're doing and some of the programs you can bring into parishes. Correct?
Exactly.
Also, Father Watson has a book called Inviting God into Your Life, a practical guide for prayer. This is available at EWTN's Religious Catalog, which again is just EWTNreligiouscatalog.com, or you can call them at 1-800-854-6316. Okay? And of course, if you have the opportunity to do like these nice people have done a lot from Orlando, Kissimmee, Haiti, and Puerto Rico, and all kinds of places we have here tonight.
Colombia.
We'd love to have you come and join us. Just contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966 or go to our website, EWTN.com, and they will give you all kinds of information about a place to stay, scheduling the programs, masses, tours, etc. And if you're going to the Shrine of Blessed Sacrament, you can go to their website, which is OLAM Shrine.com. Ready for some questions?
I certainly am, Father.
Let's start off with Marianne. Hello, Marianne.
Hi, Father Pacwa. How are you?
Fine, ladies, from New York.
Excellent.
From New York.
Yes, you are. And what's your question today?
Just a brief question for Father Watson. I'm feeling a little bit lost in my life right now, and I go to Mass. I say the Rosary every day. I go to confession, and speak, Lord, your servant is listening, and I just don't know how to listen. How do I know when the Lord is speaking to me? And I was hoping that you might be able to give some advice. When do you know that the Lord? I know that the Lord isn't going to scream in my ear, but I was hoping that maybe some advice on how do you know when and if the Lord is speaking with you. And I thank you so much, and God bless you both.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Marianne.
Marianne. Well, Marianne, I would begin with the question to the Lord, how can I know when you're speaking to me? So instead of saying it as kind of a question to the air, ask it of the Lord and say, Lord, I need to know when you're speaking to me. I don't know how to do it, and I need your help. So when we turn ourselves over to the Lord and we admit that we can't do something and we give the Lord permission to do it for us, then it's like that bumper sticker, let God be God. So, but I have to express a need. So, Marianne, I would say that's the first thing. Ask the question to God. And I don't want to push a product, but this book that we've developed, 40 Weeks in Ignatian Path to Christ, it takes time to develop that skill of listening. And you have to do something every single day, and it has to be strategic, and you have to have a focus for it. And I do believe that if people have a focus to their prayer life, a focus to the way that they do confession, that the combination of a daily strategic prayer, which is what Ignatius's examination of conscience is, with frequent confession, and I recommend monthly, that spiritual discernment becomes an art that you can learn over the course of your life. You can't learn it just like that. It takes time.
And one of the things true about God speaking that both of us have learned over time is that doing something that's very good, serving the Lord, a lot of good fruit coming from it, and then the rug being pulled out from under that does not mean God has stopped speaking to you.
That's correct.
That God said, oh, that was good. You learned something, didn't you? Now, I'm pulling the rug out, and you're going someplace else.
Right.
You know, this is, it's sometimes, you know, God is speaking in certain kinds of emptiness
Right.
that we experience, as well as in the peace and joy. And it's
Right.
paying attention to where those are coming from.
And it's sometimes the experience that we know that St. Ignatius had planned to spend the rest of his life in the Holy Land and was kicked out by the Franciscans.
After he was put under arrest by them.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, the Franciscans in Jerusalem took me to where they had him under arrest.
Right.
I got out.
But his life plans then changed, and since he couldn't do that, then he comes back and he founds basically the Jesuits and all the educational institutions. So sometimes God doesn't even do it. Sometimes life circumstances put up a wall, but God can always find a way over the wall and to get you something better than if that had never happened. So.
Yeah, and even after he gathered the first Jesuits,
Right.
he planned to go back to the Holy Land,
Exactly.
and a war stopped it. So they went to the Pope and
Right.
took another
Do you have a
direction.
plan for us? Right. Right.
We have a question from our studio audience. Young lady, where are you from?
Kissimmee, Florida, St. Catherine of Siena Parish.
Great, good to have you here.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
I
Thank
love that
you.
area. And your question?
Father Watson, you mentioned that of the importance and the ability of young people, particularly even preschoolers, being able to live a spiritual life and have that foundation, particularly through contemplation and silence. My question is because most households, as you know, with kids that age are not quiet and they're anything but peaceful with the busy schedules and all the things going on. So in what ways can a young person, even to that age, be encouraged or even practice or encourage their family members to practice that kind of contemplation?
That's an excellent question.
Great question.
Very good question. And the problem of noise is not just kids, but it's also the buzz of technology and the hum of electronics all around us. You know, they say that adults now, on an average, are checking their cell phones 165 times a day. So there's all of this sound, and in my book, Instructions for Finding This Quiet Place Apart, I say find a technology-free zone. If people put their mind to it, if I say to you, Father Mitch, will you be able to find time to watch American Idol next week? Gee, I don't think so. Now you wouldn't have time for that, right? But many in the audience might have time. But we find time and we find space and we find money to do the things that are important to us. We have to start to value this time of quiet enough that we will find the time. And you can also, again, ask the Lord, say, Lord, I need to find a quiet place. Help me to find a quiet place. And sure enough, the Lord will probably plop something right in front of you that had been there all along that you hadn't paid attention to.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And it's, you know, certainly one of the things that could help in that kind of a situation, maybe the house is noisy, but there's outside the house.
Exactly.
Sometimes a park.
Right.
It's one of the reasons we have parks.
Right.
If possible, sometimes the parish church.
Exactly.
If there's a Eucharistic chapel that a young person can get to, or any person, and go and pray, or even if it's just the church itself, and go in there,
Right.
and pray,
Right.
and be quiet there.
Right.
But getting out into nature is a very good way.
Right.
Now, if you live in Kissimmee, be careful about getting into the Everglades and all that. You know,
The quiet alligators.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The alligators are quiet too.
Yeah. But I would say this for young people too, you know, it's a question that you can pose to your parents. Say, I would like to be able to find a place to pray on a daily basis for 5 or 10 minutes that's quiet. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And if you kind of make it a family project, your parents are not going to say, no, we're not going to help you find a place to pray. Of course they're going to help you.
Or be quiet.
Or be quiet, right. And
That was my
right,
parents'
right,
prayer
right,
for me to
right,
be quiet.
To be quiet, right. And so if they help you find a place and you start doing it, you start acting as an example to other people, and you can kind of also lead. I know many, many people who've stopped the practice of their faith, their Catholic faith, who have children, and the children are in grade school, and the children will come home and they will say, well, Sally's parents go to church, how come we don't?
Right.
And it's the voice of children speaking the word of faith and spirituality that can sometimes jog the adult's heart into kind of wakening up their conscience.
And just another little slight thing, some families will, I've known, have a room for prayer.
Right.
And a place where there's a comfortable chair, a crucifix, an icon, maybe even a candle.
Right.
They don't light candles without your parents' permission.
Exactly.
And and when you're in that room, everybody else in the family knows you're quiet here.
Right.
Leave them alone. They're praying. Won't get you out of the dishes though. All right, we have another caller. Hello, Anna.
Yes.
Hi, where are you from?
Illinois.
Great. And your question?
Yes. I wonder, is this book too Catholic to give to someone who's been out of the church for quite a few years?
Great question.
Which book?
Well, yeah, I think the 40 days. Well, which
The
one
40
would you,
weeks.
If you were, all right, 40 weeks. If you were starting somebody, let's rephrase that question. Is there something that you've written that you could give to someone just who's been away but might be interested in trying to pray a little bit?
Well, it depends on what the person is open to. If the person has come to you with a question, I've been away, I don't know how to get back, I think the 40 Weeks, An Ignatian Path to Christ would be a very valuable book. Mm-hmm. You can do it on your own. It's non-threatening. Mm-hmm. You can pull into your own heart. If you want something just to kind of spiritual reading, the Inviting God into Your Life might be a good start for somebody.
Yeah,
right.
So that would be maybe a little bit more basic.
A little more basic, prayers, and I put that together based on my work with both adults and college students, listening over a 10-year period about what made praying in the day-to-day difficult. So I started taking notes. And it's a very simple book, but it has very, very practical advice on prayer, how to do it, how to regularize it. And I have different ways. As you know, at the 3 o'clock hour, the hour of the Lord's Passion, stop briefly and just thank the Lord for the gift of your redemption. Or when you're taking a shower, you have hot water, you have water. Give thanks and gratitude. St. Ignatius said he thought the greatest sin were sins against gratitude, against the great gifts of creation and all the gifts that God has given to us. So there's simple things you can do to open up your heart to God. But I think that 40 Weeks book would be a very, very good book. And I've used it, I have other Christian communities that are also using that and finding incredible richness in the Ignatian spiritual tradition.
So, and by that you mean non-Catholics?
Non-Catholics, right.
But they're still finding this helpful.
Right.
Yeah. I remember when I was working with some seminarians at Vanderbilt. They were in divinity school, and they found the exercises very helpful to them too.
I think the Ignatian disciplines are maybe the most accessible to a wide variety of people, because Ignatius's core disciplines, I think, really reflect the structure of the conversion process of the Gospels. And they're very simple and very pragmatic.
Yeah, how you come to realize you're a sinner.
Right.
You need Jesus.
Need Jesus, right.
And then you get to learn how to follow Jesus.
Exactly.
Sir, where are you from?
Butler, Pennsylvania.
Good to have you here. Welcome. And
Thank
your
you.
question?
I'm not sure it's a question or not, but I've read the exercises of Ignatius and the spiritual discernment, and I've recently been reading over and over again the Imitation of Christ, and I found almost everything that I think that I should need to know in that very simple little book. Where Ignatius, sometimes I don't know where he's coming from and where he gets his credibility as far as as far as coming to know Christ.
Great. No, that's very good. Good distinction.
I'll tackle that question.
Yeah.
The only book in Ignatius's cell when he died was The Imitation of Christ in a Bible. Mm-hmm. He was very much influenced by that book and kind of spread its popularity. It had been around for quite a few years, when he was born, but it was a book that was very, very important to him. And there are some examinations of conscience in The Imitation of Christ that he probably experienced and incorporated into his own spiritual life. But the exercises of Ignatius are not really a book that you want to read. It's dry. It's a how-to manual for a spiritual director to guide somebody through a retreat. which is why I tried to take its graces and kind of unchain it from the structure of a retreat where you would normally experience it, and put it in this 40-week book so that it's kind of all the graces of it open up to somebody in their daily prayer life. So the exercises is not a book you read.
Right. It's more of a manual
It's
for
a
the
manual.
retreat director.
Right. It's an exercise manual.
Right. So, it's a different kind of book. Whereas the Imitation of Christ
Right.
is something for anybody to read. That's still a wonderful book.
Incredibly classic, powerful book of Christian spirituality.
Yeah. Well, we have another caller. Hello, Chuck.
Hi,
Hi. Where are you from?
Republic of Texas,
Ain't you some? Where in the Republic of Texas are you from?
Fredericksburg.
I probably have met you, haven't I?
Yes, you have.
Uh-huh. But I don't think I owe him any money. But Chuck, what is your...
I don't know. Did you play poker here the last time you
No,
was
sir.
down?
No, sir. I stopped playing poker years ago.
Oh.
I'm bad at it. So, what's your question, Chuck?
My question is, does Father Watson have any ideas or clues for parents who have children that were baptized and raised Catholic? They grow up, go off to college, and get married, and then they leave the church. How can a parent possibly interest those children in coming back to Christ?
Chuck, that's a great question, and it's one that's on the hearts of a lot of folks.
Right.
You've certainly dealt with that when you're dealing with college students.
Constantly. And I think the example of the parents is important. I think if parents have a rich prayer life and a rich spiritual life and are happily engaged in their faith, what I've experienced is that children who came from a home where the faith was lived and where it was real may step away for a while in college or in their 20s from the practice of their faith. But the foundation and the example of the family and the parents holds over a period of time. And if parents haven't done that, and children didn't have a very deep experience of the faith and more easily were able to walk away from it, parents at an older age or in their middle age can engage their faith in a rich way and set an example to their children. And I think you draw them by your joy and your sense of gratitude and the hope that you yourself have discovered, but also praying for them. I just buried the widow of the former Polish ambassador. He defected to the United States under Ronald Reagan during the Solidarity crisis in Poland. She prayed for him. He was a communist, an atheist, prayed for him for 40 years that he would find the Lord in his life. And he did. And the prayer from the heart, when we can't affect something ourselves, the Lord takes that as kind of a spiritual energy of love, and he applies it in the most effective way at the right time to create the good that you want to. So pray for them. I would say pray for them.
Also, I would say, Chuck, I know because I go out hunting that area. And one of the things when you're in the stand, waiting and watching, you always have to keep a real alertness. And you're hunting for souls here.
Right.
And there has to be an alertness for, when they make themselves somewhat vulnerable to a word from you. Now, you can't just beat them over the head. Just like, when I'm out in the woods, I don't go say, come on, dear, come on, let me at you.
Right.
No. You got to be real quiet. But then there's a point in which they show a certain vulnerability that you take advantage of.
Right.
Well, same with them. You always have to keep a real spiritual eye out for when they make themselves vulnerable to hearing a word, and they may run off for a little bit.
Right.
That happens.
Right.
Don't worry about that.
Right.
You just give that word, and then it'll work inside of them even when you don't see it.
Right. And I think
That's
sometimes
important.
the parents, too, have to make themselves vulnerable.
Yes.
Because you're expressing, and sometimes instead of being anxious that they've walked away, you can make yourself vulnerable and you can tell your children, you know, it breaks my heart that that you've stepped away from the practice of your faith. I don't know what to do about it, but my heart's broken on a certain level.
Right.
And you have to, and sometimes if you just share that, it's very important. And sometimes you may not know what to do or when to do it. I think Ignatius had a very, very good image of he said it was a small stream. He said, but it was quite deep. And there were rocks that you could walk across. He said, but there was a period where the water was moving so swiftly that all the mud and the silt was stirred up and you couldn't see where the rocks were. He says, sometimes you simply have to wait for the water to clear in order to get to the other side.
Right.
So you're not going to get hurt. And I've had relationships, people that I needed to say something to, and I didn't know how to do it or when to do it. And I just kept praying, Lord, show me the time and the opportunity. I'm available, and let me know when to take that risk.
Exactly.
And the Lord does it, right?
And and part of that, taking that risk of telling what's going on about how you feel about them, loss of faith,
Right.
is to let them know, a certain vulnerability about your concern. It's not about winning an argument with them.
Exactly.
It's about being able to witness Jesus' love for them.
Right.
That comes from his love for you.
Right.
We have another question. Hello, Marley.
Yeah, this is Marilee.
Hi, and what's your question?
My question is a simple one. How do you get rid of all the noise and racket in your head when you're trying to practice contemplative prayer or praying the rosary? You can turn off the television and everything else, but how do you turn off the racket inside your head?
Good question.
Oh, I got an answer for that. You can spend a huge amount of effort trying to stop all of the noise, or you can turn it over to the Lord and say, Lord, there's a lot of noise in my heart. Is there something that you want me to pay attention to? So instead of letting it be a barrier that's creating anxiety that you're working harder and harder to suppress, you just turn it to the Lord and say, Lord, I can't get focused. I can't listen. Is there something in all of this cacophony in my head that you want me to pay attention to? And if so, show it to me and let me not be anxious. And the Lord might show you something very, very important in all that noise.
Exactly. Sometimes that interior noise is sometimes trying to get out
Right.
some other issue
Right.
that you want to bring to Jesus.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
And that sort of peels off some of them.
Right.
We have another caller. Hello, Virginia.
Yes.
Hi, where are you from?
Hi, I'm from Southern California, Irvine.
Great.
Question, can the 40 weeks be done individually, by someone individually, or should it be done in a community or parish setting? And number two, if it should be in a community or parish setting, how does one bring that into their parish? I mean, I'm in Southern California, and I know Father is in Seattle, Washington.
Easy question. The book is designed for an individual to do on his or her own. And I also have resources that I'm developing a fully resourced program for parishes. So there'll be manuals for team leaders, instructions for small faith sharing groups. But the journey is personal. This is not a discussion group where you're reading a book and discussing an idea. It is you praying, you getting into your own interior life, and then sometimes a faith sharing community can be important to just have the encouragement that other people are on this journey with you. But it's a both and. You can do it by yourself or you can do it in a parish. And I will just say that I will be down speaking to the staff and the chancery in the Diocese of Orange in late June to talk about both the grade school program and the parish program. So it may be coming to a parish near you soon.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say, I suspect that Bishop Kevin Van would be interested in doing this.
Yeah.
All right, again, we just want to let you know that it's the Sacred Story Institute at www.sacredstory.net, or you can call them at 206-302-0300. 7630, which is over in the Pacific time zone.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Father Mitch. Great being here.
And love to have you join me in giving a blessing.
Happy to do that.
Almighty God bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you and lead you in all of his ways by his peace. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You know, we can have Father Watson come and share these things with you and all the other guests and all the other programs here that we do, because this network is brought to you by you. You have always made it possible over the last 30-some years. And we just need to remind you to keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. And then we will be able to pay all of our bills too. Thank you very much.